Dos preguntas claves: ¿abrir o no abrir escuelas? Y la segunda, si los chicos no están en el jardín de infantes o en la escuela, ¿qué pasa con su desarrollo social y cognitivo? Charles Pascal, uno de los grandes especialistas en educación temprana, desde Canadá, nos da esta mirada. Good afternoon, Charles Pascal. Thank you so much for being here today in La Repregunta, el especial.
Buenas tardes, hola.
Hola. Charles, in Argentina, there is a huge debate regarding the opening or the closing of the schools, the in-presence classes at the schools because of the coronavirus pandemic. Which is the situation over there in Canada?
Well, we're doing just fair. We're not doing great. Mm-hmm. One of the most important things to consider when we open schools is the importance of social distancing, class size. Class size, especially for elementary students, should be no more than 15. There should be 2 meters of distance. There should be ventilated space. And we need to hire more teachers to deal with fewer students. Mm-hmm. The best reopening of schools in the world is in Denmark, where they've done all these things. In Canada, we're not doing as well as we should.
You are saying that it is not going well in terms of which kind of negative results?
Well, we haven't had very good government leadership. Mm-hmm. They seem to be spending more time saving money than putting the resources in required to hire more teachers. If you're going to have smaller class sizes, you need more space and more teachers, and you need ventilated space where the air is fresh and it's a healthier environment. So in Canada, it depends on the province. In Ontario, we have more and more parents keeping their kids at home, mm-hmm. Doing distance learning, e-learning, rather than having their kids in schools. At this point in time, in Ontario, our largest province, 200 schools have had outbreaks of the virus.
How many schools are there in Ontario?
In Ontario, we have about 4,000. Uh-huh. But within each of those schools, there are more parents keeping their kids away from the school, mm-hmm. keeping them at home. And of course, this puts pressure on different families where parents need to go back to work. So it's a very difficult day-to-day concern in Ontario and generally Canada.
So, but to make it clear to me and to the audience, the government, in the case of each province, because it is a federal state, a federal country, for example, in Ontario, the government decided to open schools, and parents could decide if they send or not their kids to the school. But the public policy has decided to open schools.
Yes, you're quite right. We are a federation, and it's provincial responsibility.
Charles, you mentioned that elementary schools, primary schools, and high schools are open. What about kindergarten?
Yes, preschool in Ontario. There's full-day kindergarten, 4 and 5-year-olds. That's totally provided by the state.
And are they open now in the context of the pandemic?
They have opened.
Mm-hmm.
They have opened.
Mm-hmm.
They have opened. And again, the challenge is to ensure that we keep the proper number of students and children in those preschool, mm-hmm. Kindergarten classrooms. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions regarding medical information around the world is that young children don't get the virus. Increasing evidence from around the world indicates that children of all ages can get the virus, and many of them are asymptomatic carriers, mm-hmm. Who can bring back the virus back home, where there may be grandparents and parents who have underlying challenges.
Mm-hmm. Charles, you are a very respected expert in early child education. And one of the things that has been really impacted in the context of the pandemic is, this social aspect of early child education. Kids are not able to be at the school. So is this the most difficult challenge that the pandemic is presenting for the education of kids, of children? The social aspect, or is it the cognitive aspect?
Well, they go hand in hand. I mean, if a child feels safe, if a child feels supported, if a child has their parents and the educators working together and sharing information about the children they share, it's a wonderful opportunity for growth. You can't achieve and develop your cognitive capacity if the social side and the mental health side is challenged. And so you're quite right, Luciana, that there is tension between wanting kids to be kids, wanting students of all different ages to be with their peers because it's healthy. On the other hand, we have to make sure that those environments are safe and healthy. Mm-hmm. And we also have to remember that the pre-pandemic education wasn't working for everybody. Mm-hmm. Education was not working for children who had social problems or mental health issues. And so we have to look at the pandemic as something that's pulled back the curtain on the things that weren't working before the pandemic and use the pandemic as a way of reimagining the future of preschool, the future of elementary and secondary, and the future of colleges and universities.
You were the advisor, or you are, the deputy, you were the deputy minister in education of the Ontario province, and you were very important in the recommendation of early child education as a mandatory offer from the state in 2009 in Canada with this report with our best future in mind. In that occasion, you proposed to make it mandatory in terms of the offer from the state for every kid of 4 years old and 5 years old that should go to, if parents want it, to kindergarten. In this context, when children are generally not going to in-presence classes in kindergarten, what are they missing?
Well, look, the ones who are going into safe environments, and let's be really clear about what we proposed in Ontario. So it's not mandatory that all 4 and 5-year-olds go to full-day kindergarten. Mm-hmm. It's for individual choice. But because it is so popular, because it is a place where children learn how to solve problems through play, 95% of all parents put their kids there. So it's worked out quite well. Now, right now, I visited early childhood, a preschool last week, and it was wonderful. It was very safe, proper number of teachers, wide open space, 4 and 5-year-olds, wearing masks, lots of social distancing. But I've also seen teachers, kindergarten teachers, do remote learning mm-hmm. With kindergarten students, where they're all at home, but they're all together on some form of Zoom participation, where they are working together and they're playing games, mm-hmm. and parents or others at the home are working with them to enjoy some play base. It's not perfect. It's always better to look forward to when we can all be back in our learning environments. But in the meantime, the only way we're going to get that is by reducing the amount of cases, mm-hmm. And that's been the problem. If we don't curb and flatten the virus curve, none of this is going to resolve itself, and we're going to be at this for a long time.
Charles, here in Argentina, the educational system is struggling to provide online education to many kids which are under the line of poverty or in the line of poverty because there is not internet connection, for example. But there are other kids, middle-class kids, upper-class kids, who are at home, maybe with parents or with grandparents, and these parents are trying to play with them. You are a supporter of play-based education. Is it enough to have a playroom at home with some blocks and some kind of games to stimulate, to motivate, and to make the children learn the cognitive skills that are very, very key for their development?
Well, look, when I talk about play-based, I'm not talking about just any kind of game, but there's so many different ways that parents can engage their children in play-based education, play-based learning that taps into the things they're already interested in. And so parents can be taught these things, but we also want to make sure that we have educators. In Ontario, we have early childhood educators and certified teachers working together in a group of about 15 to 18 at most. So we have about a 1 to 8 child ratio with 2 educators working together. So we can do much better than we are. But you're quite right, Luciana. You talk about what we call in English the digital divide. There's a lot of families for whom high-speed internet is not available. We have many families who are middle class where there's so many people at home working remotely with their children at home, and they have high-speed internet, but they have to share it, and it reduces the effectiveness of it. That's why governments around the world have to invest in how to develop high-quality, interactive, supported remote learning opportunities where university professors are scrambling to figure out how do you teach remotely. I've been doing it. I've been using webinars and highly interactive technology. So we need to invest from preschool right through colleges and universities on how to do distance learning really well. And that's going to take 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, we are in the middle of the ocean of the pandemic. It takes a lot of time to reach the border. So what I'm trying to understand is because of it is clear that very low-income kids, it is very, very difficult, the situation, because there is no internet connection. Parents are not able to help them because of the cultural capital. But if you think of the middle-class kids, are they in a better, much more better situation of the lack of training of their parents, because they are just parents, in terms of how to take advantage of the resources that they have at home? Well, if you are not an expert, maybe you are not helping your child or your teenager, in spite of you think that you are doing this.
Even in the pre-pandemic world, if you're a single mother with 3 children and you're only earning, minimum wage salary, these are heroes to be able to deal with 3 children, to deal with a low-income job, to be able to feed the children and pay the rent. These are very difficult choices, and that's the way it was before. So when we look at issues of reform and reforming education, we have to remember that kids just don't live in schools. They live in communities. They live in societies. So when you're going to reimagine education, you also have to look at income distribution. You also have to look at poverty reduction. You can't just change the world by teaching all parents on how to support play-based learning at home. You cannot reform education without looking at social programs, poverty reduction, the environment. And this is one of the problems with governments. As you said, Luciana, I used to be a deputy minister in the Ontario government. And, I used to say that, never the brains shall meet. We have a department over here that does one thing, a department that does something else over here, and there's no integrating policy. And that's one of the problems with governments and how they make policy.
Charles, in the past you have insisted on the idea that when children, for example, in the province of Ontario, reach the first grade of elementary school, 28% of them in 2009 had problems to learn the skills that, for example, reading and writing, that they supposed to should be developing in that moment of life. When is it too late to change the game of life if you have deprivation of resources, of motivation, because of, in this case, the pandemic, and over the pandemic, your social condition?
Luciana, I must tell you, I've done thousands and thousands of interviews over many years, and I'm not sure I've ever met a better prepared interviewer and host than you. Anyway, before we introduced full-day kindergarten for 4 and 5-year-old kids, 250,000 Ontario kids now benefit from a full-day kindergarten. As you pointed out, when we started, 28% were showing up in the first grade seriously behind their peers, and many of them never caught up. After a number of years in introducing full-day kindergarten, the percentage of students ready for school has gone way up. The vulnerability has gone way down. Mm-hmm. And so we've proven that high-quality, play-based, problem-solving, curiosity-driven preschool is the best investment a society can make in terms of problem-solving, reducing the cost of mental health and social services and justice problems down the road. And so the amount of money that investing in preschool saves a society is extraordinary. And I should also mention something, that of the 28% that were showing up behind their peers in first grade, 60% of that 28% were from middle and upper middle class families. Uh-huh. They suffered from learning disabilities. Now, obviously, the other 40% are low income families who, were desperately behind, mm-hmm. and many of them have caught up. So we have research now since 2010, 10 years of research showing and proving that socially, achievement-wise, and economically, in terms of economics, the return on investment for high-quality preschool is the single best investment the government can make.
What about, because we are very worried about the impact of the lack of school in-presence school classes in our children, and the idea that they are being behind, they are getting behind, in terms of their development. What could happen if a child of 4 years old or 5-year-old is not today going to kindergarten, has no internet connection? What will happen with his or her skills to learn in the next year or the next 2 years? It is a very serious impact, or could she or he develop them and catch up with them in a couple of years or in a couple of months? I don't know.
Another great question. Look, it's the number one question I get from parents all over Canada. Will my child, whatever their age, preschool, first grade, 7th grade, even university, will my child fall behind? Will they ever catch up because of the pandemic? Mm-hmm. And the answer is most will. But again, if we go back to pre-pandemic, education in various parts of the world wasn't working for everybody. Mm-hmm. Too many were already falling behind because they had undetected learning disabilities or undetected mental health issues. These are the things that education needs to deal with in a reformed kind of future state. And so for students who are, average students or above, things will work out. It'll take a year or two, depending on the subject for each student. So I'm not worried about students who may have fallen behind. Mm-hmm. Educators know if I'm teaching 7th grade and I have a subject where I'm getting people who were during the pandemic in the 6th grade version of my subject, the first thing I'm going to do is find out what they already know and don't know to be successful with me, so that I can provide some remedial lessons and information to make sure they catch up and smooth out the transition. So for most, they'll catch up. I'm not worried about that, and I know parents are. But for those who were being left behind before the pandemic, we need to invest much more resource in dealing with students who have issues that require a very specialized support so that they catch up. And we're going to have to spend far more money than we do right now to support those who are disadvantaged through no fault of their own.
Charles, the last question, there is this argument, and you have developed this argument also, that many kids, when reach 1st grade, they are a bit behind. Maybe if you see the problem from another side, could be that we are expecting too much from children in 1st grade. For example, the Finnish educational system received children at 7 years old at the school, in elementary school. So maybe we are putting a lot of pressure on children in the 1st grade of a school. We could wait for them to the second, to 7 years old or 8 years old.
Another great question. Look, if I had my way, if there's a government around the world that would listen to me, I've certainly tried in my own backyard, I would change a lot of things. And the pandemic has called further attention. Yes, we put too much pressure by how we teach, by the grades we assign, by the fact that we, unlike Australia, we have 2 months of the summers off in Canada because we used to need the kids work on the farms. Well, we no longer have an agrarian economy, and we still have these long summers where some kids, lose what they've gained.
Yeah.
So I would like to see 1st grade right through university all be a problem-solving approach. To take what we've learned in preschool about creative, play-based problem-solving and change the way in which students engage with other students to solve problems and change everything that we do in terms of subject by subject by subject with grading schemes and testing that basically doesn't help student growth. It puts pressure and stress, and that becomes a problem. So I would have pedagogy that builds on what we know about full-day kindergarten in Ontario, where play-based problem-solving should go from not just kindergarten, but through 1st grade, through high school and college and universities, where students can work together without over-testing, subject by subject. But having the disciplines we need to learn, we learn by solving problems in groups of students.
Thank you so much, Charles, Pascal, for being here in La Repregunta, el especial. It was a pleasure, really.